Hello guys and welcome back to my budget deck channel. Today with Performage Lightsworn Shaddoll deck profile, and it is a version where you want to go second with. I basically already uploaded a version somewhat like this with Invoked Splash in, but this time it's a little bit more with Shaddolls, with Lightsworns and Performages, and just about a rank 4 engine in a sense, all going second. And I will talk about why I choose which card, what other cards you could be playing, and I'll be explaining my card choices in general, so stay tuned for that one. And first of all, Downrest the Pancratops at 2, because, well, this card helps you to get rid of a lot of stuff. It's good against certain back row decks, it's good against certain other forms of removal that your opponent might stock up on. Other than that, the card gives you technically a body on board if that becomes ever necessary. I mean, you could go into beat caught with this card, so I feel like that is pretty neat. And even if you get 2 in hand, you still could summon Shekinaga from your hand, basically. So I feel like this card at 2 is totally fine. You could even play it at 3, but I felt like 2 was enough. 1 Shaddoll Beast, because for the extra draw. Why wouldn't you play Beast if you play the Shaddoll engine? Triple Wolf, because, well, free body, getting stuff into the graveyard, milling with this deck is a little bit thing, so I feel like Triple Wolf is definitely fine. If you have this card in hand, can still use it with Shaddoll or El Shaddoll Fusion, so in total this card barely bricks you out too much. I mean, if you draw 3 of them and you don't draw Solar Recharge, then you're kind of screwed, but yeah. Let's hope that doesn't happen too often. 1 Shaddoll Dragon for back row removal, 1 Skull Mata for sending the trap card to the graveyard, possibly sending the spell card to the graveyard, and then maybe linking away the Shaddoll Winda, possibly if you instant fusion her and then getting Shaddoll Fusion to your hand most of the time. That kind of combo works. It's a little bit of deck thing as well. You don't have to play this card technically, but I felt like the card worked really nice in this deck. Next up, Raiden had a Lightsworn at 2, because I feel like at 2 the card is kind of neat, bumps up your Lightsworn counter a little bit in the deck, so you run a few more Lightsworn monsters. Since you're not really at that much, I think you're on 8 in the deck, which can be quite problematic with Solar Recharge, but being able to have a normal summonable monster, because if you don't run the Invoked engine like I do in my other deck profile, check that out by the way if you're interested in a variant with that, then I feel like Raiden being able to just send 2 cards to the graveyard isn't too bad sometimes. I mean, some people would ash that. I still think it's a little bit wasted. But yeah, I feel like the ratios work out fine. Double Performage Trick Clown. Just basically, if you get 1 Trick Clown off and you still have another one in your deck, since the deck isn't set to completely mill through your deck as other Lightsworn variants that I did, I feel like double Trick Clown is quite nice. So you technically could do it in a follow-up turn again, especially since you're playing multiple of your newly released constructs, at least 2, so I feel like that could come up as well. But if not, you could take 1 out and you still have Wolf and that kind of stuff anyways. Performance damage Juggler 2 is also a neat card. Technically could prevent some burn damage if it ever comes to in a competitive match, to the whole thing of yeah, it's round time and you don't want to be burned, then that's kind of neat. You could negate that. Well, I mean, can help you if you draw into it, but mainly if you send it to the graveyard, being able to search Hat Checker is the trick here with this card. But there's different ways to get into the graveyard, so we talked about that as well. 1 Fearless, being able to send it to the graveyard of Curious is a possible thing, so I feel like that's quite nice since you're going second. If you get the effect of, if this card somewhat mill it into the graveyard, even with Solar Recharge or whatever, and then getting it back with Lumina is still quite nice. So I feel like at 1 the card definitely works out in the deck. Could play it at 2, feel like could be too much, could be too bricky, but if you want to, you can take 1 Trick Clown out and put 1 Fearless in. Performage Hat Checker, obviously for the rank 4 engines, since you're going second, you will most of the time have enough monsters on board. I mean, even if you play Nibiru, then you already have enough monsters on board technically, since that would be the 3rd monster. Yeah, that already says anything. I think this card is really good in this deck. Lumina Lightsworn Summoner at 2, so you could do technically a little bit of a loop for link monsters and stuff. If you have cards in your hand that you really want to send to the graveyard, this card effect in the deck I felt like was kind of necessary, so you kind of could hard draw the card as well, but not only search it off of Charge the Light Brigade. Since that is the case, I feel like this card works pretty well in the deck at that. You could play it at 3, but I feel like it's really not necessary. At 1, it might not be enough. One Shaddoll Hedgehog, because being able to add one Shaddoll monster to your hand, especially if you your opponent doesn't play extra deck monsters and you still want to be able to use the fusion summons, then that is quite crucial to the deck. Same goes for Shaddoll Falco, since you can technically stall a little bit with this deck, or there is certain things that you can during your opponent's turn with El Shaddoll Fusion, and yeah, then you can revive stuff like Shaddoll Construct. It's quite nice. You get another body on board for not link summoning, but for some fusion summons. So I feel like in general, this card has its place in the deck. You don't have to play it, but I felt like the card didn't feel bricky in the deck. Actually added as another body to your board, and I like the card in the deck. Triple Effect Veiler, place any random hand trap here that you want to. Maybe Ash Blossom if you feel like you want to put a little bit more money into this deck, because I think Ash Blossom isn't too expensive anymore to be included in stuff like budget deck profiles. But just to at this point play with the thought of playing one magicalized fusion and then putting in the Quintet Magician, just so you could basically pump something up after like 1 or 2 turns as the last resort, and then having an extra spell cast in your graveyard rather than a zombie or whatever with Ash Blossom. I felt like that was more worth it. Plus Effect Veiler, there's a lot of decks that card hits as hard these days, and they can't really chain block stuff then, so you can't use it. So I feel like Ash Blossom and Effect Veiler, depends on what you want to be running, but I think yeah, another light monster as well for stuff like your constructs, possibly I thought the better option, but that is up to you. Triple Solar Recharge, it's a risky card in this deck, don't get me wrong. You could put it down to 2, but I feel like it's not too hard to get off with you running 8 Lightsworn monsters plus the 3 Charge the Light Brigade. You should be able to most of the time draw them together. When you're lucky, you technically get draws off of stuff like Minerva again. I don't know, I think at 3 it's okay, but if you feel like that breaks too often, then definitely take that one out, or put it down to 2 possibly. Triple Instant Fusion, a card where it helps you go in second, could add some link fodder to your board, could help you summon out El Shaddoll Winda if you don't have a Shaddoll monster but you want to use the Shaddoll Fusion. That's also always a thing where if you draw into Shaddoll Fusion, or especially if going first as well, that can be problematic. So you can still go into at least some monsters and get something done, which yeah, the first turn plays of this deck I'll talk about in a second, not that great. Shaddoll Fusion for going second, pretty strong, because there's not a lot of decks around that don't summon from the extra deck. I mean, yes, Guru Control might be a thing and this kind of stuff, but Grand Magi possibly. But in total, I think the card usually pays off. You can still side the whole card out if you want to, but I think, yeah, I think that ratio is fine. Charge the Light Brigade basically gives you access to some monsters due to mill, and adds stuff like Lumina or Raid into your hand, or if you really want to mill stuff, technically you could add one Wolf or other Feelers to your hand as well and dump it with Solar Recharge. But mainly, even then, you kind of would want to dump the Raid in possibly and hope you draw into Lumina and then get going from that point onward. One El Shaddoll Fusion, since there's multiple possible ways to add this card to your hand, even if you mill it, I think this card could even be played at 2 possibly. It's more useful going first than going second, but even going second you will find your fair amount of plays for this card. So there's that. One double or nothing. If you don't want to play Utopia double, then possibly play some Synchros and some another rank 4 possibly, like Tornado Dragon or Abyss Dweller or whatever, those kind of things for the card. Probably even a second Shaddoll Winda, but I feel like that barely ever came up, so I felt like that ratio is fine. But Utopia double, especially for go second deck that has easy access to rank 4s, this card when it doesn't break, I feel like on Yugioh Pro I draw this card more often than not. But in general, this should be able to give you access to free OTKs, especially against decks like Marin says possibly that you shut down maybe a little bit earlier or whatever, or they negate all your stuff and then you just still get a rank 4 out, or a Salaman Grade or whatever. This can lead to heavy OTKs. And one Shaddoll Core that I recently put in this deck because the card actually works in multiple ways. It works if you're going first, technically, with stuff like Shaddoll Fusion. Also, can, during your opponent's phase, trigger stuff like Topologic Bomber Dragon, which you should consider playing in this deck, because I think the card adds some really nice plays. In general, the card is just really nice because you can send it to the graveyard with your Skrumata, you can send it to the graveyard with your Construct, you can add cards back to your hand, you can add the card back to your hand, which is quite nice as well, since it's like a spell trap card. I feel like in general the card is pretty neat in my opinion. But now let's talk about the extra deck and the one Shikinaga, because you run earth monsters with the Pankratops and Hat Tricker, and that is somewhat of a go first play, I guess, technically, because you can do some things with this. And yeah, I mean, it's okay, it's okay. I feel like you don't have to, but I feel like that can be quite handy from time to time. Shaddoll Construct, I think the card is really neat. If the extra deck space wouldn't be so super tight, you would possibly play this card at 3, but I think at 2 is still a good enough ratio, and the card in general is just so amazing. Like, none of the effects are really once per turn, you can send stuff to the graveyard non-stop, so I feel like this card actually really neat. El Shaddoll Winda for stun, if you want to go first, then this card can come in super handy in my opinion. Other than that, yeah, I mean, you'll possibly can summon it at the end of your turn, or like in battle phase if you have stuff like El Shaddoll Fusion, and then end your turn on it, so your opponent can't really come back. I think the card is neat, the card is better than you'd think, but in a lot of situations you possibly don't want to go into it, because you can actually do some more shenanigans without it. Camion Wizard, it's a card that's expensive. You could play any other rank 4 Dark possibly, so you have more access to stuff like Bunda or Light, if that even exists, but I don't think that exists yet, not sure. But I just like the card in general. I think it's ridiculous that this card costs about like $7 or whatever, and it's that old and has nothing going on for itself. 1000 Eyes Restrict, basically for killing your opponent's board. So you see you have 3 instant fusion targets. Basically, most of the time you want to go into one of those two, just for the rank 4, or getting rid of your opponent's problematic monsters, or bait and negate. One Scarlet Red Dragon Archfiend as a synchro. You could also go for Black Rose Dragon, because you have a more reliable engine for this, technically, being able to summon it with Raiden and Lumina, or like Fails and Lumina. But in general, since you have more of stuff that you can, more level 4 monsters that you can special summon out, and if you then have a Raiden as normal summon, going into Scarlet Red Dragon Archfiend is probably going to happen more often. Utopia double for the OTKs, Baguska for stall first turn if you want to. You can swap this card out if you really don't care about going first and just want to basically hope that they all send you blind second most of the time. Minerva, basically, it's still a good card. I feel like you can get some draws off, but since you don't run that high of a number of Lightsworns, it can be problematic. It can be a win more card. Yeah, your opponent has to deal with it, find a way to remove this card without necessarily destroying it, because then you could pop a few more cards, so you can end on this card as well. Gets you a few cards to the graveyard, can start some more plays, but since you already have to invest 2 cards into it, you have to see when it's worth to play this card and when it's not. Exiton Knight, very nice card, because weirdly it's a light monster and fiend as well, so it could help you go into stuff like Curious as well. But on the other hand, being able to nuke your opponent's board is quite nice, especially if you go into side deck and side stuff like Dark Ruler no more. Then Exiton Knight can be quite nice. Topologic Bomber Dragon, a card that even works well for going first, because you will be able to somewhat get 4 monsters on board most of the time, so going into this card isn't too bad. Plus, I like the restriction that it's only 2+ effect monsters, so you only need 2 monsters, not like for the Boral cards where you most of the time need 3. So even if you went into stuff like Curious, you could still go into the card afterwards, which I like. And stuff like Marinza, stuff like Dragonding, stuff like Salamangrade, they barely have plays without summoning stuff to the zones Link monsters point to it. So they really have to take care of this card first to be able to do plays. And if you then have stuff set like your Shaddoll Core, possibly, which you can summon to your opponent's turn onto the zones, then yeah, it's quite neat. You get the second effect off of Shaddoll Core, and I think in general then you can disrupt your opponent more than you would think you could. don't say, not saying you should always go for that first turn, but if you don't have any other play, that card can be quite nice. Also, ending on it, going second is not too bad in my opinion. One curious because you can send all kinds of cards to the graveyard and pop off from that one. So I feel like that card works really nice, and it's not too hard to get out in the deck. It's not super easy because the problem is yeah, sometimes you don't want to link away stuff like your construct, for example, but still it can be worth from time to time. And Beat Cop, just a generic, the most generic down pointing to arrow link monster that you can find. Obviously in the extra deck you can play whatever you want. For the side deck, against combo decks, side Nibiru. Against Pendulum, whatever, you can side Ghost Ogre. Against stuff like maybe True Draco, whatever, that has a lot of continuous spell traps. If you ever play against Weather Painters or whatever, then that's a thing. Also Twin Twisters is a thing. I put in Dark Ruin no more because I didn't find enough space for any of the cards for Super Body because the deck space is damn tight. So I felt Dark Ruin no more and Nibiru against combo decks because you don't want to just rely on having one card in there, but you'll find enough cards to swap out. You'll probably then cut stuff like the Effect Veilers, the Pankratops, possibly stuff like that, and maybe one Damage Juggler, one Trick Clown, or the Skomata. There's always a lot of space that you can make for side deck cards, which I quite like. Red Reboot against very trap heavy decks where you feel like you could OTK them possibly if you disable their traps for one turn, which should be possible in general. Most of the time you'll have more problems than anyway because of your Shaddoll fusion is probably not going to be live that much. So yeah, but other than that, I feel like that deck is quite solid, and I hope you enjoyed the deck profile. Leave it a like, subscribe, comment, and I hope you have a good day.